Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan. One of the most disappointing things in my life is to start something and not follow through. It makes me feel horrible, particularly if I have some goal that's out there, in the ether that I can kind of visualize. And, when you're in media, you think about things all the time. You think about, what could I do creatively, that draws people in, that they want to hear what I have to say and all of that. And when it doesn't come to fruition, I always look to myself and blame myself and say, I was lazy. Okay. And, I think that it's a burden that many of us bear. Today, we're going to talk about a fellow who actually used that term about finishing what he is starting, and he used it to great effect. Because in the end, his goal, his long-term goal, apparently, as stated by him, was to murder his wife. And he succeeded. And since he murdered his wife, he has had a place on death row in the state of Florida. And his case is in the news as we speak, because he's facing down something that he finished many years ago relative to the person that he said he loved. She died at his hands. Now, there's a strong possibility that he is going to die at the hands of the state of Florida. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Dave, I think to say that you and I are driven is an understatement. I view myself as an overachiever. I wasn't given a lot of really good sense along the way, a lot of great advice. I kind of learned through failure a lot, but I kept on going. I was not going to sit in a mud hole on the side of the road and, just woe is me. I was going to get up and I was going to soldier on. And I see, you and I, maybe it's unfair, but I see you and I as on, parallel paths in life. And we are finishers, aren't we?
The fact that you're getting all this tied into finish what you started in one of the most despicable crimes I've ever heard of in my life, Joe, is pretty amazing. It shows you the brilliance of Joseph Scott Morgan, friends, right off the bat, because Dusty Ray Spencer, that's the guy's name, Dusty Ray Spencer, 39 years old at the time, killed his wife, Karen, but he warned her. Okay, this is a domestic violence show, and if that triggers you in any way, you need to go ahead and consider that's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about a married couple who the husband kills the wife, and didn't happen the first time that he beat her. Didn't happen the second time he beat her. It took time, but the whole idea that he was going to finish what he started was recorded by a jailhouse phone. That's the part about this, Joe, that shocks me as much as anything else, because the criminals know they're being recorded. I mean, they're told before they get on the phone to talk to somebody. You're sitting in the county jail, you're told it's being recorded. People are going to listen, right?
Yeah.
And yet they still say things.
Yeah, they do. What is it? What's the old saying? Mouth in motion before brain in gear, or mind in gear. I think some are driven by boredom to do that. Yeah. I think some are driven by the fact that they're low IQ,
right,
and they don't have the ability to understand that there are certain little parameters you have to exist in. They're compelled to do that. But I would like to say that this episode today is not about Dusty Ray Spencer. Though he will be mentioned along the way, this is about Karen Spencer, because this is Body Bags, and we like to talk and remember the dead and understand how their lives ended, and it's a real commentary, isn't it? Right now, across the country, there are people that are protesting, making their voices heard about, the execution of Dusty Ray Spencer. Where were those people in 1992? When Karen's life was brutally ended, were they out there saying we're not going to stand for this anymore? That domestic abuse is wrong. Where were they at that point in time? Because I'll say, Karen's life did in fact matter, and it still matters to this day, because she exited this life at the hands of a bully and a brute.
Joe, a lot of the reason people are talking about the execution of Dusty Ray Spencer is because he's 74 years old, and he will be the oldest person executed in Florida. To give you a heads up, we are recording this before his execution. By the time you watch this, unless something happens, he'll be dead. So the idea, Joe, that people are all about Dusty Ray Spencer because of his age. Think about this for just a minute. When Dusty Ray Spencer murdered his wife, he was 39 years old. She was 40. He was 39. He was 40 years old when he was sentenced to death, Joe.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't 74. He's not an old guy who in a panic defending himself attacked somebody and they died. He was sentenced to death in 1992. And they're just now getting around to carrying out that sentence. Now, I don't want to hear about he's too old to put to death. I think that waiting this long to carry out a sentence is tantamount to terrorism. I think you could probably argue that. You're sitting on death row? Come on.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about this case is, and we're going to get into this, is the fact that that Karen's teenage son witnessed these events. As a matter of fact, Dave, he's the unfortunate. He did not die at the hands of this person because of what he and he's just a kid. When this happened,
he's a teenager.
If you want to put on this show about chronology here relative to this fellow's age, as he's staring down the death chamber, I go to the promise that Karen's life held at that moment in time, the promise that her son's life held at that point in time, all those years ago. When he's the son is literally trying to interdict the situation. I don't know that I would have been that brave, to do what this kid did. And now he lives with this, in his mind, or has had to live with it throughout his life relative to what he saw his mama go through. And then, all of the promise that, I think, and again, I'm going to wax sentimental here, but, I think about Karen. Karen probably had thoughts when she was 40 years old. She's got a teenage son. She's thinking, wow, wouldn't it be great to have grandbabies someday? To get to hold them, to have them sit on my knee, for me to take them to the store and buy them stuff and make their favorite foods. What's that going to be like? She never got to realize that, Dave.
No, and the thing is, Joe, when we look at the cases of domestic violence, they impact an entire family, not just the person who is the victim of the domestic violence. And you mentioned Karen's son. Now, Karen's son was not somebody who witnessed things from afar.
No.
There were 3 separate incidences that we have to get into when it comes to Dusty Ray Spencer and Karen, and his wife Karen. But you know what, friends, just to give you an idea, they together owned a painting business, and their marriage had been escalating in the fall of 1991. It had gone from arguments to, I'm going to assume here, because I think it's a fair assumption, Joe, that the arguments got more and more volatile to the point where physical actions were being taken well before Dusty Ray Spencer was ever put in jail. After the first physical attack, when he was arrested for assaulting Karen, I believe that because I've never seen a relationship go from 0 to 100 overnight. There's usually a progression,
Yeah.
and I believe that's what took place here. And you mentioned the teenage son. He actually was physically involved in trying to stop what was taking place. But just so you know, Karen and Dusty Ray Spencer were married. They were living in the same house, and they were partners in a painting business. So there was a lot going on in this family.
Yeah, and it is an incredible dynamic when you think about it. And who knows why people at the end of the day will take the life of someone that they have pledged themselves to and said at one point in time that I love you and I'm going to be with you for the rest of your life in sickness and in health. I'm going to take care of you and you're going to take care of me. It's really hard to look back and understand how the wheels fell off, but I think that we have a few clues along the way, and some of it leads back to money, some of it leads back to frustration over that said money, and maybe a life that they were living that was just completely incompatible with joy and love. Brother Dave, we know that this tragedy that unfolded down in Florida all those years ago has sent ripples, through time relative to Kieran's family, and certainly the people down in that region that were aware probably of how dastardly these crimes were committed against her and against her son, and there is no payoff in the end, now we've come to that point in time where maybe he is going to have to answer. But I think it's important for us to reflect a little bit and talk about, because this was not a one-off event, as you pointed out, brother. This is something that escalated relative to these attacks on Kieran.
Well, start with December 10th, 1991, okay? Because that's the event that started everything that transpired over the next 6 weeks, okay? December 10th, 1991, Orange County, Florida. And this is where Dusty Ray Spencer attacks his wife, Karen. The argument that began the fight allegedly began over Dusty Spencer being mad that Karen withdrew money from their business, their painting business. I think he was just looking for a reason. Again, based on what we know now, there were a lot of arguments taking place, and they were escalating. And this one escalated to a physical confrontation where Dusty Ray Spencer attacked his wife, Karen, her teenage son, home at the time. I want you to be aware of what took place. And Joe, you're going to have to explain, to us so that I understand. When the argument escalated to physical violence, Spencer was choking Karen, and he had one hand over Karen's nose and mouth and choked her with the other in a fit of rage. So he's covering the nose and mouth and choking. That's a pretty dastardly way to try to take somebody out. I mean, it seems to me that if you're doing that you're trying to suffocate the life out of the person you're fighting with. Is that an incorrect assumption, or is this a tickle fight?
No, No, you're right on target. And here's the thing about it is, Dave, and I want everybody to look here. He was looking her in the eyes while he was doing it. Okay. And if you've ever seen somebody struggle for breath, and maybe you've helped people that were struggling for breath during the course of your life, it is one of those things where it's just, you're compelled to show mercy. You're compelled to provide assistance to somebody. But when the person that you are married to is looking in your eyes with rage, hate, maybe that just kind of blackness in their eyes, and they have you C-clamped, because that's what happened. He would have had to have C-clamped her with one hand, and that means grabbing hold of her throat, okay, and this area right in here, and compressing it with his hand, squeezing. And oh, by the by, let's take the other hand and place it over the nose and the mouth in order to prevent her from the uptake of oxygen.
This seems like a really planned attack, Joe, from actually putting her in that position. It seems to me that Spencer knew what he was doing by choking her with one hand and covering her nose and mouth with the other.
Yeah, and you really wonder at this moment, Tom, had it escalated to the level of what would be referred to as a homicidal rage, because with these domestic violence events like this, there is this kind of creeping, sinister thing that occurs. I got to say this. I don't think, what's the old, Charlie Rich song about, we don't know what goes on behind closed doors. Yeah, well, that's got two, that coin has two sides to it. All right. I don't think old Charlie was singing about domestic violence when he was talking about that. But I will tell you this, this thing doesn't happen in a vacuum. He felt comfortable enough at that moment in time, because I think that he had probably been bullying her around, knocking her about, threatening her. And like many domestic abuse victims, many of them are seeking to please that individual. It's a horrible cycle to be in, because they think if I will just say this, or if I'll do this, it's going to smooth things over. And eventually, they'll see the light. I don't know that ever actually happens. Okay. I'm a cynic. I don't believe that, because I think that when you're a monster, you're a monster. And if you can do that to the person that you allegedly love the most in this world, it's a tough thing, I think, for an individual to pull themselves back from the edge, and be loving and tender moving forward, because this is a progression that takes place. We see this kind of played out in this with Karen Spencer, Dave.
Well, all right. This is where Joe started the show, about finishing what you start. Okay, December 10th, Spencer attacks his wife, and he gets arrested, okay? The police arrest Dusty Ray Spencer, lock him down, and based on what happened, I mean, he got arrested for domestic violence, but remember, he was trying to kill her. Now, he's in jail. The very next day, Joe, December 11th, 1991, Dusty Ray Spencer calls his wife, Karen. He's in jail. She's at home still trying to recover from nearly dying at his hands, and he tells her, when I get out, I'm going to finish what I started. Now, Joe, everything's recorded. Everything is recorded. So officials knew. But you know what? The judge set Dusty Ray Spencer, set his bail $5,000. $5,000 was the bail. 10%, $500, okay?
Yep.
That's what he had to come up with to get bailed out of jail. Now, I have been through a lot of paperwork trying to find out, hey, what day did Dusty Ray Spencer get bailed out, and who did it? Still haven't found it, but it's out there.
Yeah, I'm going to be a smartass for a second and just
go ahead.
And just say, gee, I wonder if he went into his business account for that. that's what I'm thinking about here. Anybody that wants to put angel wings on this guy,
Oh my gosh.
yeah, I wonder where he got that money from. Again, and I still think, with Karen as his spouse, that's your next of kin. That's the way we look at it in death investigation, right?
Yeah.
That's your immediate next of kin. Doesn't matter if you're legally separated. That's still your next of kin. But they were domiciled together. They were
Yes.
living together. Who bailed him out? He called a buddy up. I'll catch you back up. I'll take some money out of my business account here. I'll give you back the $500. Or did he call Karen up after he threatened her? And again, going into this cycle of, maybe if I bail him out,
Right.
he'll be kind to me, because she's still thinking, that she's with somebody that's capable of being kind, even though he put his hands on her throat and put his hands over her nose and her mouth and was trying to deprive her of her life. And again, I think that's a salient point. I'd like to know what the origin of those monies were, who went to the bondsman and said, we're going to put this money up, we're going to get him out, and he's going to be walking the streets.
And you know what, Joe? Regardless of who or what, his bail was at $5,000. Again, you got to come up with 10%. That's just not very much money for somebody who attempted to kill his own wife. But as we have looked at domestic violence situations, oftentimes the attacker, the aggressor, has means of gaslighting the victim and making them feel like it's their fault. Karen, it's your fault. I'm sorry I lost it. That's not me. I don't know what came over me. I just really lost it. And now that I've had time to think about it, I'm just mortified by my own actions. I am so sorry. That's not me. That is not who I am. And I think the stress of the business really, and come on, Karen, you did take a little bit of money out. And look, we can get through this. And Karen, it's Christmas, okay? It's Christmas time. She said out loud, I want my husband home for Christmas. So he got bailed out. A $5,000 bail. The judge was aware of the threats. He was aware of what put Dusty Ray Spencer in jail and set that bond low enough that he could get out for the holidays. And he did. But Joe, here's the catch. Here's the kick. Here's the page 2. During the Christmas holidays, Karen had her fill of Dusty Ray Spencer. She had her fill of her husband. Apparently, things weren't any better.
Yeah.
And she told him, you got to get out. You got to leave. On January 4th, 1992, okay? We're talking 25 days after the first attack. A second attack occurs. This time, the January 4th, 1992 attack, her teenage son wakes up to the sound of his mother being beaten by Dusty Ray Spencer 25 days after he tried to suffocate her. This time, the son, finds Dusty on top of his mother, okay? This teenage boy finds Dusty Ray Spencer on top of Karen. And Dusty is using an iron, an iron, the heavy iron with a handle on it that you use to get your shirts. He's beating Karen with the iron, Joe. He is beating his wife with the iron. That's when the son intervened. He tries to get Dusty Ray Spencer off of Karen to stop the beating. What does Spencer do? He attacks the teenage boy with the same iron.
Yeah.
The beating that was going on extended now to the teenage son. And Joe, between Karen and her son, thankfully the police were called. Dusty Ray Spencer, being the coward that he is, took off running. He leaves his wife bloodied on the floor, her teenage son bloodied, and Spencer takes off running.
Yeah, I don't guess at that moment in time he was very delusional or paranoid, right?
Unbelievable.
Or seeing pink elephants. He had enough understanding in his mind that he needed to put separation between his precious wife and his stepson and the police to get away. He had that instinct to survive at that moment in time. It's not like he's delusional to the point where he thinks that, I don't know, little green men from Mars are coming after him, or that snakes are emerging from his wife's face and they're out there to get him. He's oriented to time and space at that moment in time. And off he goes. And Dave, when he beat her using this, and this is a blunt force attack. I had another case a few years ago where I had a guy that had beaten another fellow to death in the middle of the street with actually an antique iron, the kind that you had to set on like a potbelly stove to heat up. And the weird thing about it, the interesting thing about it's not weird, it's just kind of interesting from the forensic dynamics of an iron is, and most of us have one at home. Maybe you have enough money to take your clothes to the cleaners and say, here, press them. I'm not going to put up with an ironing board or iron in my house. I've got one right over here, as a matter of fact. But it's got these interesting little edges on it. And, it comes to a point at the top. And so you get these interesting little blunt force lacerations relative to this iron. And it's got this handle on it. Okay, just think about that just for a second. The way you can lift and you can hold and you can wield this thing. This thing is almost, if it didn't have a cord attached to it, you could use this thing as like a weapon of war, right? You think about the shapes of all of the weapons from medieval times, and on the end of a large stick. If you had one that was shaped like an iron, it'd be highly effective, right? Because of all these interesting little edges. Well, Dave, she wound up as a result of being attacked by this guy. She had to have 11 stitches in her face because, again, he's going after the head. He's going, after that area here. This is what her identity is, right? We all identify with our face visually. I know that's a rather obvious statement, but to try to destroy and disfigure someone is the ultimate I think in disrespect, because you're going to try to take away their personage as a result of disfigurement. And that's kind of a theme that runs through this case, Dave. Brother Dave, Spencer actually bolts from the second event, and he's on the radar of the police at this point in time. You would think that somebody would want to try to continue to put as much distance between themselves and this event. But when you're a bully and you're fueled by hatred and anger and discord and all those sorts of things, it's like a fly to honey, isn't it?
This is one of those things, Joe, that going back to where you started the show about finish what you started.
Yeah.
I think that was really what was driving Dusty Ray Springfield, because you go to the December 10th attack that is stopped and ends with Dusty Ray Spencer in jail. His first comment to his wife on the phone the next day is, when I get out, I'm going to finish what I started. So everything he does after that is to finish what he started, whether it means sweet-talking her to get him to get bailed out of jail or whatever. But after the second attack, Joe, I think it was well known in the community what had happened. By this time, people know that this man was given a $5,000 bail to get out of jail, and he tried to kill his wife a second time. But Joe, when 2 weeks later, 14 days, go by, it's January 18th, 1992. The part that bothers me about all of this is that we didn't understand domestic violence back in the early 90s like we do now. Or maybe we didn't talk about it as much as we do now.
We certainly didn't talk about it as much.
And so I think that this case, so much was wrong. But January 18th, when Karen's teenage son arrives home and he hears his mom being beaten in the backyard. This teenage son who already has witnessed the attacks. He's seen the aftermath, the disfiguring of his own mother. And here we are, January 18th, 1992, and Dusty Ray Spencer is at it again. This time, he has Karen in the backyard, and I want to make sure I get this straight, Joe. This time, Dusty has a knife. He is striking Karen in the face, in the head, with a brick. He is mashing her head on the cement, on the concrete. He is stabbing her with the knife in her chest, and he is slashing her face with the knife. Karen's teenage son sees what's going on and grabs a gun. He grabs a gun and tries to shoot Dusty Ray Spencer, but the gun misfires.
Yep.
Spencer takes it and beats him with the gun. The gun stock broke, Joe, during this fight. So at this point, Karen is on the ground, mortally wounded, and she's begging Dusty Ray Spencer to not hurt her son. Stop. Leave him alone. Stop. That's her dying breath, Joe. It boggles my mind that based on the 3 attempts on her life, the 3 attacks on Karen and her teenage son, that today we have people that want to not carry out the sentence on Dusty Ray Spencer because he's old. He should have been taken out right after the verdict.
Yeah, and I guarantee you, I think that probably there are enough inmates in prison that have witnessed their mamas be subjected to this kind of behavior. Mm-hmm. The only reason he's still with us is because he is sequestered on death row. I think that he had been in Gen Pop, been a different story. Okay.
Can you go over the autopsy for us, Joe? Because when I went through the list of the injuries, they're vague. They're very, multiple stabbings, multiple slashings, blunt force trauma. Can you break that down and explain what Dusty Ray Spencer inflicted on his wife, Karen?
Yeah, I think that's very important. And one more thing, and this is if we don't have enough already, one of the really gruesome things about this, and so if it couldn't get any more disrespectful, as she is laying on the ground, and I think this information comes from the son, this perpetrator raised this poor woman's dress up like this and was pointing at her and making lewd remarks, obscene remarks about her and laughing at her. Just factor that into your thinking just for a second. It's not enough. It's not enough to do what you've just done. Now, here comes the verbal assault. That's why, I think that this is evidence in and of itself that this had gone on for some time, brother. This is not something new under the sun, okay? But when you couple that with fact, and remember how I said that there's a theme that's running here. Remember how he attacked her with the iron early on, and where's the placement of this attack? Well, it's here, where people identify us, right? And I guarantee you, at some point in time in their past, he looked at her and beheld her as a beautiful creature. Okay.
She was a beautiful woman, Joe.
Yeah. I've looked at my wife that way. I still do. I look at her and I say, how did I wind up with her? Some mug like this. And at some point in time, he saw her as a beautiful woman. But yet now, at this point, he's seeking to destroy her. Dave, there's one bit to this. You talked about grinding into the concrete or pounding her face like this. One report has him literally grabbing her by the back of her head and driving her face into the brick wall of the house. So that means she's upright at one point in time, and he's smashing her face in there. So she's, the nose is probably broken, eyes are probably swollen. Then he's wielding a knife. And he did in fact stab her multiple times. I think it was 5 times. And she's got, I think there were 2 perforating stab wounds into her heart, brother. But he takes this knife and he gouges her face with it. And not just that, he takes time to slash her face, which is, again, this is an attempt to destroy her beauty, to destroy her identity of who she is as a person for years and years. She's 40 years old when she dies, Dave. For years and years, from the first time she was a little old thing and she found out what a mirror was, she walked up that mirror and looked at herself, and that's how she always identified herself, right? And now, this, as he's seeing her, he's going to completely disrupt that. Nobody in the world is going to want you. As a matter of fact, even in death, they're not going to be able to have an open casket for you. And, she's already got this other insult on her face where she's been popped in the face with this iron and disfigured her in that manner, and other injuries associated with that initial attack. And, at autopsy, Dave, this is the fascinating thing here forensically, where you're trying to, and listen, this thing goes to trial, right? So when the pathologist is on the stand, there's been so much trauma here now going back. And we think about the pathologist is going to have to say, okay, if you look at, at injuries enumerated as 4, 5, and 6, okay, these are more distant in the healing process, or they're further down the line. So we see resolve. They would talk about the idea of these insults, these blunt force impact sites, the cut on her face that required the stitches, which is a laceration. If she's got any kind of contusion, it's probably has resolved, but deep tissue dissection is going to reveal that there's still something there. And then you have to marry that up with what's current and what happened, in that antemortem, perimortem, and postmortem state with her body. Because Lord only knows what he actually did to her body after she was actually deceased. So there might be postmortem injuries to her because there was not a shutoff valve with him. Well, you think about this.
Can I ask you something about
Sure.
the judge made a comment during the sentencing that Karen, through all of this rage-induced violence that happened to her, the judge said that she was conscious. She was awake and alert during all of it, to the point where, as I mentioned, she was telling Dusty Ray Spencer to leave her teenage son alone, stop beating him.
Yeah.
But the judge said that she probably was alert for another 10 or 15 minutes before she bled out from
lingering.
From the stab wounds to her heart and lung.
Yeah.
Is that an accurate assessment by the judge?
Yeah, I think that it probably is. I mean, the judge just didn't pull that out of the air.
Right.
That testimony would be directly, or that from an evidentiary standpoint, those statements about her existence there, that the root of that comes from the forensic pathologist, because they're interpreting these injuries that you're seeing, demonstrated here. And listen to this now, the judge, it's amazing what judges have to do, okay? Because they see things like back in chambers and pretrial that we don't ever see.
Right.
Okay, like all of the images. Okay, now there's certain things that will be excluded because they're too prejudicial. Okay, and the judge has to rule on that, right? We're not going to allow this in, but the judge would have seen this. And if there was in a preliminary hearing, there's a possibility the medical examiner would have testified at the prelim hearing as well. The jury would not have heard that. Suffice it to say, though, that the prosecutor in Orange County would have, in fact, laid this out. They would have had a very definitive timeline about what he had done. Because, listen, when they're doing this, Dave, you have to understand, relative to a death penalty case, and this would have had to have been qualified prior to as a death penalty case, there are all these boxes that have to be ticked along the way. And it's much more detailed, I think, to a great degree. They're going to really take their time, and they're going to lay out this narrative, because what does prosecution have to do to the judge? They have to justify to the jury and the judge that this event, this homicide, meets the criteria to put this individual on death row and to execute them. And guess what? They convinced the court that that was the case. And the judge had seen this. I'm glad you brought this up, because even the judge is aware of it. The judge is probably sitting there shaking his head saying, "My Lord in heaven, what have you done? Yeah, you deserve to be on death row." Because, anytime there's a death penalty case, automatically it's appealed. It goes up to appeal. It jumps right to that position. When you have a conviction, the sentencing, it's going to go up on appeal. That's mandated. All right. And therein, look, kudos to his attorneys. They've kept him alive this long. But therein is the rub, right? Because now they've got people that are writing articles about how long he's been languishing in prison. Well, he's been languishing in prison because his attorneys did such a stellar job at keeping him alive. Matter of fact, they've gotten him to a point where he's over 70 years of age now.
Yeah, he's 74 years old, Joe.
Yeah, they're going to put the needle to him. Well, I mean, it's not Karen Spencer's fault. He did this when he was 39 years old. There's a lot of things in life that we don't want to be held accountable for, right? On and on and on. And so the state of Florida is, they're going to move forward with this. And I think you had stated they've had a number of executions already.
This will be the ninth. This will be the ninth one.
Yeah.
In 2026. And, the thing is, people are protesting, saying he's too old. And like, well, you know what? If they had executed him in a timely manner, he wouldn't be 74 years old,
Right. Yeah.
It's
ridiculous. Don't curse the rain for falling. It's going to fall. I mean, that's the nature of it. And so when he goes into the death house, Dave, I was struck by the fact that now Florida has multiple options. And I think it's within 30 days, an inmate or an individual that has been sentenced to death, they can request that they still be placed in the electric chair down in Florida. But, and of course that hasn't been utilized. They had a couple of bad experiences with electrocutions in Florida years ago. And these stories just go on and on and on relative to the electric chair. But now, from what I understand, and remember, you and I actually did this for one of our episodes here in our home state of Alabama, where we had the first use of the nitrogen mask. Well, Florida, that's an option now too. The nitrogen mask is an option, and I have heard that firing squad is an option now. So I don't know precisely how the order is going to work. I can tell you that relative to what will transpire with Spencer in the death house at Florida is he's going to be administered a drug that will essentially, he'll have an IV in, and it's a sedative etomidate, I think is how it's pronounced. And it's going to knock him unconscious in the first few seconds. Then they're going to recordinium bromide they're going to give him, and it's going to be a neuromuscular blocking agent. It kind of paralyzes the muscles at that point in time. And then they'll give him potassium acetate, and that's going to cause cardiac arrest. So there's essentially 3 pushes that take place. And somebody is going to have to, press the button to start those injections and, to kind of, move him through that. I can tell you what is not going to happen relative to Spencer is he's not going to have his face carved up with a knife. He's not going to be beaten with a brick. He's not going to have his face driven into the side of a building. He's not going to have somebody pull down his pants and make light of his genitalia. That's not going to happen to him. That's not going to happen to him. And he's had multiple Christmases, maybe spent them alone. I have no idea. He's had multiple meals. He's had the ability to think about life and think about what could have been. That has happened, but it didn't happen for Karen. Karen had 40 Christmases at best. Okay. And she got to see her teenage son, bore witness to him being beaten to the point where this individual broke a rifle butt over his head. She got to see that. Those were her final memories. I wonder what Dusty's final memories will be.
I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bag.